Well, I'd done some strategic planning in my previous jobs, and so I sort of looked at this as a strategic planning challenge. And doing a sort of initial analysis, once arrived on campus, the Institute was in the College of Liberal Arts, and it was very involved with other departments in the College of Liberal Arts, but there was so much more. I mean, these 90 professors, they were all over the place. They were in engineering, they were in law, they were in LBJ school, they were in the sciences, they were in business. And the relationships between the Institute and these other centers, although it had occurred in previous directorships, it really wasn't pursued as an objective. So I said, this is a way for the Institute to be much more of a service for the whole college and to integrate a lot of these professors into the regional regional perspective. Something else which, being a political scientist, every time something important happened in Latin America-U.S. relations, where did it happen? It happened on the East Coast. It never happened in Texas. It happened in universities that had virtually no Latin American expertise. And here we had this tremendous talent right here, so knowledgeable. So I said, well, it seems to me we need to do something about that if we can. Also, the Institute was known in academic circles, but it wasn't known in the public at large. So I said, well, why don't we start an op-eds program? And we found an editor, sort of cajoled him into helping us take 3,000 words from a professor down to 800 words in sort of points that could be understood quickly. We had a lot of success with the op-ed program. We published in the Washington Post, in the Philadelphia Inquirer, the Boston Globe, the Los Angeles Times, of course, the Austin American Statesman, the Houston Chronicle, the Dallas Morning News, and then Peter Ward, when he was head of the Mexican Center, he continued it with the Austin American Statesman. I think he had a monthly blog, or I guess we call them blogs now. They didn't have a blog system then. So this was a way to really get the name of the Institute out, because every professor, in order to get this service, had to say in their byline that they were affiliated with the Institute or with the university. We sort of bent a bit and let them use the university, but everyone knew who was behind all of this. So there was that program. Then, of course, something happened during this period. It was sort of the burgeoning of the internet. And we started talking internally, and Ning Ling was very much involved in this. Should we create a database, a platform here that would sort of provide new information for the Latin American community? And I said, well, wait a second, if you look at it, how are we going to finance that? We can't possibly create. Is there any way to get a platform which is virtually free? And so we said, yes, you can. You just get other people's platforms on your platform. I mean, this is essentially what Google does. So we started this, and I don't want to say we were pre-Google, but we sort of were. And it was organized in a very, very systematic way so that people in government or business or teachers, and it became very valuable for teachers, to find out geography and history, economics, all organized on UT Atlantic. And this proved to be a wonderful service, 2.3 million web page views by the time it ended. Now, the sad thing is that it's not being updated anymore, and I think it should be. But anyway, this was very important during the period that I was there, and everyone knew about it. I would go down to Latin America in the summer, and Ning would say, you know, you must have been in Brazil because the hits on UT Atlantic increased. In Argentina, the hits increased, and so forth. So that was at the early stage. Later on, it was being widely used. Another element was, and this had to do with the fact that I felt that the assets of the university in Latin America were not being adequately utilized by other sectors of American society, for example, the business community. And a lot of these things sort of merged into the fundraising. They merged into the fundraising. So this was all, if people don't think you're important, why should they give you money? If they don't think you're useful, well, they'll think it's a sort of a philanthropic thing, but it's not really of a joint interest. So with these other programs, we showed that we're useful, we show we're important, but how useful are you? So what we did was we promoted a consultancy program, whereby we would have we would encourage professors, we'd sort of originate, if you will, opportunities for professors to consult with businesses or with government. They hadn't done this before, to any extent. And when we looked into it, we found out that professors could use 1 day a week on their own time, so there was no conflict with their teaching and research, their most important activities. And we also found out that if they did this, if the Institute sort of took the money in and paid the professor, we'd have to pay this huge overhead, 50% overhead. So that wasn't going to work because that would then make the consultancy non-competitive. So we worked out a system whereby we would work with the professor, we'd originate the need, work with the professor, and the professor would get the honorarium, but the professor would promise to give 10% of the honorarium as a donation back to the Institute. And this was sort of this unrestricted funding, which was extremely valuable for the food and for the scholarships and for topping up this or topping up that. And that proved to be a very good program. We had a whole number of consultancies which were instituted in this way. So all of this was leading toward the fundraising. Because although they never said this, they never said, Peter, you're coming, you've got to raise funds. But it was so obvious that was part of the deal. But you just can't go out and raise funds if you don't have something to show. So these other things were to have something to show. So what did we do? Now, first of all, I want to say that none of this could have been done without the outstanding team that was here. So you had Pat Boone, Ann Dibble, Virginia Haggerty, Ann Quiroga, Ludmilla McGlamory, Ning Lin, and Kent taking over that as the base, really the administrative base of the Institute. And people don't realize how important that is in every department, in any organization. I mean, so many people, they get their PhDs or they get their big salary checks and they sort of dismiss those people. But I've always noted in every job I've had how important that is. And we had a really good team here. Then you had the faculty members. And I mentioned earlier, I knew some of them before I came, but it was such a pleasure to make new friends and work with new outstanding colleagues. So, of course, there was Peter Ward and Victoria, and then Henry Selby, and Rick Adams, of course, who was here, and I had known him years before. Brian Roberts, and Richard Shadell, and Joel Hertzer over in anthropology and archaeology. And then Max Sherman over in the LBJ school was very interested in Latin America, and Hal Box in architecture, and Larry Lake in petroleum engineering. And then, of course, Greg Urban was assistant director. John Brown was head of the advisory. Ginny Burnett, so important to the whole program. I mean, of course, I'm forgetting some people. Susan DeSmith, who was also associate director. But Bob Green over in business. And a lot of that was supported also by the president. And then he became chancellor. The sorts of things we were trying to do with the business community. And we also started a program in law, a joint program with law. I mean, that was a big gap in the joint programs at that time on the teaching side. In any case, it came time for the fundraising. And so we decided to concentrate on the Mexican Center because that's obviously close by and a lot of interaction between Mexico and Texas. So working with Peter Ward, we created a committee. Very prominent people agreed to be on the committee. I think partially because of these other things that we'd done. So Jerry Thompson, who founded 7-Eleven, he was the chairman of the committee. And we had Martha Rowan Hyder, who had already been a philanthropist for the university. She and her husband giving a lot of artwork to the law school. Gary Jacobs of Laredo National Bank. Roberto Newell of McKinsey & Company, Miguel Aleman from Mexico, one of the Sada members of the Sada family from Monterrey from Mexico, Donald Bonham, who owned Fiesta. Tom Frost was on the committee of Frost Bank. So so what did we work out with them? We said, okay, part of our ambition here is to raise money for the Mexican Center. So let's have a strategy. What if we get a basic fund from Texas foundations, let's say $2 or $3 million of commitments from Texas foundations to be matched 2 or 3 to 1 by outside donations, mainly from Texas. So that would, I will go out and I will get the commitments from the foundations. I knew foundations. And they signed off for this. But before I did this, of course, I went to the president of the university, who had changed now. Cunningham was no longer president. Bob Berdal was. And I said, this is the plan. We've got the committee says this is a good idea. I am going to go out and talk with foundations in Texas, and we'll try to get a package together, and then they will help raise the match. He said, sounds like a great idea, go for it. We got commitments from the Sid Richardson Foundation, really a firm commitment of $500,000. We got commitments from the Meadows Foundation, verbal commitments now, Houston Endowment and the Moody Foundation. UT Atlantic got $250,000 we got from the Mellon Foundation. In our visits to Venezuela, visited Intevep, which is the research arm of PDVSA oil company, and essentially got a $900,000 grant from them for the petroleum engineering. Larry Lake over in petroleum engineering, he was very happy. And we were very happy because part of that also went to the Benson collection. And with Duncan Osmond's help, he was a graduate of the Institute. The Susan Vaughn Foundation gave us a nice grant. So we had some fundraising experience. And then Deborah Herring had been a graduate of the Institute, and she had tragically died. And the family essentially took all of their savings and gave it to the Institute for the Herring Fellowship for students to have money when they go to summer research. So there was already this experience in sort of minor ways, if you will. Burton Grossman was on the committee. He owned a number of Coca-Cola bottling plants in Mexico, and was a great philanthropist. And even he funded the committee's activities. He handed me a check for $20,000. This will fund the committee. Developed his relationship with Gotari. Then Fujimori came to town, and we had a major event with President Fujimori here on the university campus. And when we went down to Latin America, we would meet with Menem. And when we went to Chile, we would meet with Aylwin. And Gaviria also was very supportive of the Institute. When we went down to see President Gotari, Salinas de Gortari down in Mexico, we were approached by a legislator from Goliad, Texas. He said, you're going down to see the president of Mexico, and I want to go with you because I want to deliver a letter for him to come and speak at the state legislature. And we said, well, it's really been so carefully planned, and we should, it's academic, and it's all been agreed it's academic. I'm afraid we just really can't. We're going down on the president's plane, and it's going to be very little awkward. And I understand. So we get into Los Pinos, the university delegation, including all the people I've mentioned, including Rudy de la Garza, who then left for Colombia. And who's sitting there in the anteroom but this legislator? Somehow he'd talked his way in to the meeting and said he was associated with us when he wasn't associated with us. So we talked to the secretary there and said, the gentleman over there is not really with our group. He's here to deliver a letter, but this is supposed to be, we understand it's supposed to be. So the secretary goes over and gets the letter from the legislator, takes it in to President Salinas, comes back out, hands the letter to me and says, I'm sorry, sir, it's not possible for you to go in now and see the president. So then suddenly it's time for us to go in. This legislator jumps up. He runs towards the door. The secretary has his arms out like that. He ducks under the arms. And he goes and he sits down right next to the president. And before the meeting even begins, he makes his speech and he delivers the letter. Now this is the Texas way. This is the Texas way. And there was another similar incident like that when President Fujimori came to campus. We had a wonderful program planned for him. And this is before he was convicted and in jail. So this is a democratic period, before the autogolpe and before the corruption and the surveillance and all that. In any case, Clayton Williams, who had run as governor against Ann Richards, came up to me and he said, Dr. Cleaves, we're here at the university and we understand President Fujimori is here, all this activity, And we're an oil company, and we know that there's oil there in the jungle of Peru. And we're the ones that can exploit that oil for the benefit of Peru. And I want to talk to President Fujimori about this. I said, well, you know, this is an academic event. You know, we do want to interact with the business community, but actually this has all been approved to be with the students and the professors and the administrators and so on. You mean to say there's no way that I can see him? And I said, well, I hope you are able to see him, but certainly not today in our event. Well, could you give me his schedule? What he's going to be doing today? Well, I said, you know, the Secret Service did tell me that I should not give the schedule out to anybody. But I'm a Texan, and this is university. I said, well, I do have to abide by the Secret Service regulations. I understand. So anyway, President Fujimori gives a speech over in the LBJ school, and then we walk underneath the pavilion there to the LBJ library to go up to on the elevator. The elevator door opens. Who's there but Clayton Williams? He was there, and as the elevator goes up, he says, now, Mr. President, you have a lot of oil there in the jungle, and we can exploit it for you, and we know how to do it. President Fujimori said, please talk to my assistant. And that was the end of that. You go to the top floor of the LBJ library, and you listen to what LBJ says. It's very moving. He says, no one comes to this office, this is talking about the president, without having very valuable and heartfelt aspirations for, he says, the country, I would say for the Institute. And you try your best to do what you think is best. And some things work out and some things don't work out. But you're so pleased to have had the chance. I learned what value there is here in the faculty and the students, in the administrators. The ability to mobilize all of this still represents an enormous opportunity for this institute. And so much good has been done. I mean, under the current administration of Charlie, I think it's been a wonderful, wonderful tenure. I also think that more needs to be done in terms of modernizing access to knowledge through books. Books are getting a little outdated, a little passé. We have this tremendous collection here, the Benson Collection. To what extent can the Benson Collection be a model, working with Latin American libraries, on how you convert to the modern system of information accumulation? Here's a chance for real leadership. And there's a chance also for strengthening the two centers that exist now, the Brazil Center and the Mexican Center, which may be underfunded at times, and even thinking about why not a center for Central America? We have such Central American resources here. Why not a center for the Andean region? Richard Shadell so much wanted to have a center for the Andean region, but the trouble was he started on it about the last year he was going to retire, and I said, I'm so in favor of this. I mean, I worked in Peru, Bolivia, and Ecuador. We need an Andean center. You're retiring. Please find another professor who will take over that mission, and I will work with that professor. He never could find the professor, and then he retired. He was a very, very good man. The Argentine Center, it should be converted into the Southern Cone Center. And with that, you know, you would mobilize and focus a lot more of the attention to counterbalance something which is so evident in economics, where there's no longer any regional concern about economics. It's all econometrics. But the regional perspective, as we know, being part of the Institute, the geography, the history, the culture, the ethnic diversity is so key for anything that you're going to do in any of these countries. It's not just all abstract globalism. So there are lessons learned, and I think whoever comes in now next, with after the very successful administration of Charlie, I mean, he'll find so many good things here, but he'll still find things to do. He'll still find things to do.